Wanted to build tanks like this, the VT-12 or the T90M, maybe the 2K22. Well, in this video I'm going to show you how I build these tanks and how they look for what I would say probably a pretty good tank for what the average of the trailmakers community builds. In this video I'm going to show you my thought process, how I build it, and we are going to be building the T34. I don't recommend copying my T34 block for block, as this is meant to show you how I build my tanks, not meant to show you how to build a T34. Before I even start building the tank, the first thing I like to do is I will search up the tank that I want to build. I'll search up a 3D model of it. I usually like to use Sketchfab as it lets you look around in a 360 view instead of looking at images. Now, if you're building a more rare tank that's not as common, you will probably have to use some other website of a 3D model or base it completely off of images, which sucks. I always like when you can find a Sketchfab model, but you're not always going to find one, so you're just going to have to manage with what you can get. Then the next thing I also like to search up are the dimensions of the tank I'm building. So the T34 is 6 meters long, so for each meter we're going to do 4 studs. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meters long. Then we also need it to be 3 meters wide, so this is going to be 1, 2, and then if we copy this on the other side, this would make that 3. So this is now the dimensions of my tank. Now you don't have to follow these dimensions to an exact. Sometimes I'll make a block, a couple, like 2 blocks wider, or something like that, or make it a little bit longer. Sometimes it just is what it is, but this is the dimensions I'm going to be building off of. So now I'm going to do a time lapse, and you can try and follow along if you want, but yeah. To build the front. Now you may think it's fine to just kind of place some blocks here and shape it out, which would mostly work for if you're building a simple tank that just you don't care about really. But here is how I build my tanks, as I like mine to be detailed and I like them to be powerful, because with these wedges they're not very strong. I keep the bottom ones usually because it's a waste of complexity to try and build out the bottom ones, as you're not going to be really hit there very much. But what I like to do is I always like to basically build out however tall I plan the tank to be. Well, so this seems to be 2 blocks taller than the actual tracks. So then we're going to build out like this. So what we're going to do with that is basically we are going to place some hinges, and then we are going to place some blocks. Then we do this. Then we're gonna come back trying to go for here. So we're just gonna build it out longer. Alright, now we're gonna add a seat real quick. I usually like to fit mine more in the back, but you're just gonna place a armored seat, as this is what I believe. It has the most armor, so that way you won't have to worry about your seat getting shot out a lot. But basically, this is our plan here. As you can see, is just try and shape this out as best as I can to get the shape that I'm looking for. So if I extend this out by 1 more block, this will allow for a look like this. And then everything kind of comes together. As I actually might try this instead. Sometimes this helps. There we go. So, as you can see, we have a very smooth plate. Now, for now, we're just gonna grab a NOR gate, and we're just gonna hook it up in there. And that's what we're gonna leave it at for now. We're gonna remove the inputs. I'll come back to this, and then that's when we'll start adding the detail to it. Alright, I'm gonna get into another time lapse, so see you. Now, time to get on to the tank mechanics. I usually just add a couple engines. I like to make them the Motorhead DLC ones just because they sound nicer for a tank. But you don't have to do this. So then we are going to then add a tank steering mechanic. And then I also like to make these go forward and then back. So right now, as you can see, my tank perfectly works. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Alright, so now we're going to get on to the next part of this, where we're going to just do another time lapse, and I'm going to build out the rest of the hole. What I like to do here is I usually piston glitch my turret. It just helps it not have any connection issues, and I can like adjust it the way I need to. So what we're going to do here is now we are going to start building out the turret. Now we are on to building the barrel of the gun. Usually you can use your 3D model to like guess how far out the barrel will go. Is usually how I do it. So here we're going to use the rounded 1x2 cylinder. And it seems to go to about this far. Now, what I like to do is I have a balancing system I use with my friends. You don't have to use this, but I need to search up the caliber of the T-34. Hold on, alright. So the caliber of this is a 76 millimeter. So it's definitely an older tank. So what we're gonna do is you just need one tank cannon. Now we are going to set it to be R2. So here's this. If you ever do need more tank cannons, you would basically just use a tube piece right here. And you would basically connect more of these, and then you would color the tank cannons glass so that way you don't see them. Alright, now next thing we're going to do is we're going to lower down the speed of these aiming servos, as this is supposed to be a tank and shouldn't turn that fast. Speaking of which, we need this to be a 360, so we're going to increase the angle of this and the angle of that. Alright, so now I just need to look at the tank and compare it to the 3D model real quick, just to make sure. Okay. So it's almost accurate, but I feel like it needs to be a little taller. So I'm gonna increase the height of the build. Alright. So we're just gonna build this out a little bit. Increase its height. The reason why this part isn't going to be a time-lapse is because I'm about to explain something that I believe is the most important part of a tank. I just need to finish this part up real quick. So now that looks a little bit more accurate in height. So we're going to then remove this part here. And we're going to replace it by 1x3. And we are also going to copy this part on the other side. And there we go. Okay. So now that you have finished the basic frame of your tank, this is the very important part. We are going to start adding armor. And then also decoration pieces. So what you're gonna want to do is basically a lot of the stuff, depending on how armorized your tank is, of course. This is a World War II tank, so it's not going to be too crazily armorized. But what you're going to do is you're going to grab these, and you are going to use a bunch of weight blocks to basically armorize your vehicle. Now, there's obviously better armor systems, but they're way more complex, and I feel like for a basic tank that you're building for fun, I don't think you really need to have a whole bunch of crazy armor on it. So, speaking of that, we are going to now copy this part right here. We're also going to fill in the gap real quick, because I forgot to do that earlier. So, let me fill this in. Alright, like I was saying, you basically are now going to... I always recommend armorizing around the turret. It's pretty important. You do not want to be turret popped. as then you will have an armorized hull like of your tank, but you will not have a very good turret. It doesn't seem to turn with this being here, so we're gonna remove that. There you go. Alrighty. So now once you are done doing all this, you are going to get to the most important part of your tank. This will basically make or break it. And that is the detailing. Detailing is a very important part of all of my builds, as if you don't look, as if I were to remove all the detail blocks plus the decals and all that on my tanks, they would look very plain and very boring. Nobody wants a plain and boring tank. So what we are going to do is we are going to obviously add a whole bunch of detailing. So basically, with whatever 3D model you have, you're going to basically add what you see on the tank. So right here, I see that there's a little turret base. So we are going to add one right about here. Then there's also an antenna, so we're going to add an antenna right about here. So, as we add this stuff, I believe this should be moved up by one block. And we're going to connect that there. Okay. So with that, then we're going to add the little other things on this aircraft, like this little pop-up part needs to... We're going to basically use a flat eye, is what I like to use a lot of the time. Little pieces like this. And then one more, which we are going to use a simple hubcap for. And we're basically going to place it right there. Now, top of the turret is basically... The top of the turret on the T-34 is pretty simple, so that's the end of that. But the front, we are going to add a decent amount of stuff. As you can see, there is a gun here, so what I need to do now is I need to fit another gun into this thing by basically kind of shaping it out the way it should be. And then here we go. Right here. Well, that doesn't seem to work very well because it doesn't bend down very far. So what we are going to have to do is we're going to have to basically build it out right out here. And look at that. Well, except for this part. Oh, that's why. Okay, that makes sense. So we're going to remove that connection issue right there using another one of these, and look at that. Okay, very cool. Now that we have the gun there, we are going to then add the other detail parts of this vehicle. Now, funny enough, the more detailed your vehicle is, with more detail parts, the more armorized it's going to be, because the detail parts also can take damage. So because of that, some tanks, if you want it to be as accurate as possible, some tanks are going to be stronger than others with armor, just because they have more detail blocks. So right here, we're going to add this. And that seems to be about it for the front. Normally, some tanks are a lot more complex than this, and they look cooler in my opinion. But the T-34 is a cool tank. It's just a very simple tank, so there's not a whole lot to add to these things while building them. Now we are going to add some short little smoke generators on each side of this. And then we're going to connect it using some two pieces right about here. Alright. now there's another part right here, so we're going to use another flat eye and basically fill it in. Now, right about here, there needs to connect some barrels. Now we are going to try and piston glitch this, but sometimes it won't work. But we're going to hope it works here, as it would be very beneficial to me. So what we're going to do here is fill in this, basically. And then we're going to add a little gap here. And then we are going to copy here. Finish this round piece off. So then we're going to basically copy it along the side a little bit. Up to about the back part of the tank. So this is going to line up right about here. And then we're going to add it on the other side. Right here. And then would you look at that? There's your tank. Then you're gonna basically set this to 0. And then we're gonna fill in the gaps right here. And would you look at that? That works. Except for it stops my tank from turning now. As it's probably too high. Because unfortunately what seems to happen sometimes is sometimes not everything translates perfectly in the dimensions, so it's not going to look as good, but this should work. There we go.
I'm just really hot right now.
Okay, so what we're going to add next is we're going to finish this tank up basically by adding some more detail blocks, basically like on the very edge right here. I'm going to try and add a mirror. It's probably not going to be very visible, because again, the model here is slightly different. There we go. So we're going to do that, and now here comes the back part. Now the back part, now the top of your tank really depends, how much you can detail it heavily depends on how how stable your turret is, as the tank can sometimes decide to as basically the tank sometimes the turret won't work very well with the decoration pieces on top. I've had to make sacrifices before over it, basically. We're gonna see if we can detail it here. Seems like we can. Alright, very good. So now that this is fully detailed, all we're gonna do now is we're gonna paint it up. Now painting is a very cool process I like to do because it makes your tank look very cool if you do it right. Now, some people might be prompted to just paint it a solid color and then, like, basically add a decal or two. What you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to actually search up. I like to search up a paint job of the tank. I like to find an interesting one. So, you go ahead and do that. And then you copy whatever you think is going to be a cool one. So, some of you would be prompted to, for example, for the T-34, paint it like this, add a red star, and call it a day. Now, while this looks fine, it doesn't look very cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the red star, obviously. But what we're really wanting to do here is we're going to want to... Actually, real quickly, I'm noticing this probably should be more rounded. So I'm going to add a more rounded hit. Sorry. I notice problems as I build them. Alright, so as we build this out, you're going to paint it this part again. Alright, now we're going to decal this with the red star. So you're going to add your red star, as a lot of tanks have. And you're going to add it to the other side. Okay, so basically, oh, what's disconnected? Oh, this part. That makes sense. Okay. So we're gonna just move that a little bit, even though it's not as accurate as possible. So now that we've added our little decal, this is where most people would call it done. But what I like to do is I like to use a method known as texturing, where basically I will, for example, paint the bottom like this, and then usually the front I will paint like this wood color, or the wood texture. And so then we get something like this. In the back, you know, we can paint something else a little bit. You can do something like this. Then the top of the tank, we're gonna do something like this. Okay. So basically what this does is it allows for some depth to be added to your tanks. This isn't like the craziest decal work either. Texturing work. You could definitely paint this up differently. Like, for example, this top part right here, instead of being like this, it would actually probably look better with the rivets. So you just mess around. You mess around with these little texturing blocks, and it basically makes your tank look way better. So then we paint this back up as gray. We decal these, so we're gonna select all these parts and we're gonna decal them green. And then we fully fill them up. Now, I don't want this video to get too long, but you can always tune your tanks to be faster, add cool features like stabilizing barrels, stuff like that. But this is basically how I work and build all of my tanks. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys later. Bye.